Welcome, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. International trade and growth and export is an issue that we have to address in Canada as we are a trading nation. And so I thought it would be really interesting to check in with Amanda Klucowicz, who is a senior relationship manager at Export Development Canada. She is a certified international trade professional, and for the last 15 years, she has supported many Canadian companies on their journey to find success in a variety of global markets. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Well, Brian, thank you for having me.
So tell me, what do you and what does Export Development Canada do to help Canadian companies export?
Well, I'm pretty excited to be here today to discuss the importance for international trade for Canada's economy. EDC's promise to Canadian businesses is to take on risks so that they can take on the world. I mean, I really
want to... Take on risks. How do we take on risks?
How do we take on risks? Well, okay, let's get into it. I was going to say, there's a variety of different ways. I mean, I think there is some nervousness right now in the Canadian market. Right after the pandemic, more and more I'm hearing from companies that trade confidence is down. We actually did, a larger survey to our customers to understand, how are you feeling about getting out there on the global stage? Are you ready to export? And, we look back at, who Export Development Canada really is. We're Canada's export credit agency. I feel like probably one of Canada's best kept secrets. We were created all the way back right after the Second World War to stimulate the economy. Yeah, I know. We've been around for more than 75 years. And I mean, it kind of puts me in mind of, there was a global crisis going on at that time. And we've, just kind of hit the mark where we're in this recovery mode to recover from yet another global crisis. But, when I say that, I don't think it really does justice to who we are. We are dedicated to helping Canadian companies of all sizes to succeed on the world stage. We equip them with the tools they need: trade knowledge, financing solutions, equity, insurance, connections, everything to grow their business with confidence. And in turn, we hope that this will create jobs and increase prosperity at home.
And how do you and Export Development Canada actually do that? How do you do it?
Yeah, so I would say, my role here, I mean, we've got a variety of different types of roles that actually interact with clients. But what I do on a daily basis is go to meet with customers at their place of business and really learn about what is holding them back. If I think about what a typical first meeting would look like for, me and a company who is either already exporting or wants to export, I'm just getting to know the business. What are your relationships with your customers or your suppliers look like? How can we strengthen those? How can we make sure that you can maybe give longer payment terms or maybe develop a way to get longer payment terms with some of your own suppliers? I think right now, working capital is a big conversation. Inflation has been high. Inventory is at an all-time high. People were really stockpiling through the pandemic, and, kind of understanding how we can leverage some of the assets of businesses to really, help them succeed and help them get back into that growth mode is so important.
So, working capital, trade terms, exchange rate risk. What does Economic Development Canada, Export Development Canada do in that regard?
So I would say probably our bread and butter and where I started out my career at EDC is with credit insurance. So I think it's a great tool. Every single company should have it, whether you have it with EDC or, with somebody in the private market. Absolutely. It really is a way to protect your biggest asset on your balance sheet, which is your receivables. So taking a look at, how you can protect that. Well, one is just understanding those risks. When a company comes to me and we put together a policy, it gives them access to information that they can go on at any time. Think about who they might be wanting to deal with, even who they might want to sell to in the future, and get an understanding of where our risk appetite is. That's important because it gives them that, not just risk mitigation tool, but sales tool to actually go in and be able to negotiate with this potential customer of what this contract could really look like. It might mean the difference between, getting the sale and not, being able to be more competitive, offering those longer payment terms. Maybe it's not 60, maybe it's 90 days. That could be the make or break when you're at the table. But certainly, the most important piece is that risk mitigation. So if we have a company who all of a sudden is finding that their customer is getting slow to pay, they're getting overdue, then that's where we can step in and really, bring the weight of Canada to the table and ensure that they're not going to have a loss as a result of, maybe somebody else's mistake.
Amanda, I understand that EDC wants to increase our international trade in the next 7 years by 60%.
Yeah, it's a pretty aggressive goal.
Is that possible?
Yeah, I absolutely think it is. I mean,
I thought with free trade and that we're already a trading nation and things like that, that would be absolutely impossible.
No, you know what? I would say that the statistics don't really speak to our strength. Over, the past few years, trade numbers have been declining, but I think we have every opportunity as a country together to really improve this. I take a look at just the 2,000 people that work at EDC and how passionate and committed we are to actually making this work. Right now, EDC is focused very much on a couple of different segments. So one being medium-sized customers who have a revenue of between 10 and 300 million. They're only 8% of the companies in Canada, but actually represent 21% of our trade revenue that we put forth. So really important to make sure that they are enabled to, take more risk, get the working capital that they need in order to get out into the international market. So that's where I would really work with companies a lot. But we understand that there are some other segments of the business, small and micro businesses often run by one or two people really need fast, easy, quick solutions that are simple to understand and implement into their business without having to jump through a ton of hoops. And we have done so much work to make sure that we really have these type of solutions available for our customers.
Amanda, all of us have got jobs and we do the jobs as well as we can. But you both a couple seconds ago and in the write-up that you sent me said that you're passionate about increasing trade. Why are you not just doing your job, but passionate about achieving increases in trade?
So I'm going to try to make this maybe not as long-winded as possible. It's a little bit corny and it's kind of close to my heart, but when I think about Canada as a country, we are so fortunate. I almost say that we have a luxury of the life that we lead here. We, generally live in a very respectful and kind country. We have access to, clean water and great food and, so many other luxuries, energy that we know is going to be reliable. And all of these things, I mean, I could list, thousands of other benefits of being a Canadian and living in Canada, but we have a responsibility to take that to the rest of the world, to improve the lives of others. When I think about some of the sectors that we are really closely focused on, agri-food being one of them, Canada's brand in food is exemplary. Like everyone wants to get their hands on Canadian food because they understand that the supply chain of how food is put together and exported in Canada is really top shelf type of stuff. It's a very trustworthy brand that when people see that Canadian, the maple leaf on any of the packaging, they feel good when they're eating it. And that's the type of thing that really makes me want to do more for my customers, because I want us to be able to actually change the world and make people's lives better, thousands of miles away.
Amanda, thank you so much for showing us your passion. I really appreciate it. It's, I don't know, with Economic Development Canada, I guess, is not really, it's a Crown corporation, correct?
Yes.
So you are a civil servant, sort of. To see a civil servant that's that passionate about their job is just fantastic. And I know there's a lot more like you, both at EDC and actually in the balance of government. So thank you so much for what you do. We're going to take a break for some messages and be back in just 2 minutes with Amanda. Stay with us, everybody.
Perfect.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. Our topic tonight is international trade and EDC's, the Export Development Canada's objective of increasing our trade in the next 7 years by 60%. Our guest is Amanda Klucowicz, who is a senior relationship manager at EDC. She is a certified international trade professional. She's been with EDC for 15 years. She's supported many companies on their journey to find success in a variety of global markets. She says that Canada needs to regain its standing as a leader in international trade, building a stronger, more sustainable economic future for all Canadians. And she wants to talk about how we're going to grow our trade by 60% today. Amanda, what is a certified international trade professional?
So I was going to say that is a person who has gone through, exemplary training to really understand, I would say, the global market from the perspective of a business owner or operator. I mean, when I started working at EDC, I, didn't have the background in trade, but, something that kind of, I'll say, grew on me at the time. The people were so wonderful here that I decided I wanted to stay for, a decade and a half at least so far. And, there's more to international trade than just what happens at EDC. We have lots of great solutions, we make connections, but understanding things really from kind of soup to nuts, if you will, requires a lot of training and understanding and working with companies. So really done a lot of courses, to understand, do some case studies, but then working in the field is a component, and having referrals to actually, say that you can be considered a certified international trade professional is an important part to getting this certification.
Why do you think companies should expand internationally?
It's really interesting. The statistics that we have put together over the years have gone to show that exporters actually do a lot better. They run up against bigger problems, and it makes them more innovative, and it really gets them into that creative zone of, what their company can really do. We find that many more dollars are actually invested into companies that do export. So they invest more into their R&D. So really, in terms of, product development or service development, they've got more to offer, and their productivity is going to be higher. They're able to really scale and, build more revenue just as a result of being able to get into a larger market. I look at the size of Canada and then look at the size of our neighbors to the south. And I mean, what a huge market to be able to break into. That could double, triple, quadruple your revenue just by working in one other market that, we have worked with for so many, many, many decades.
It's interesting. Trade barriers, tariff barriers actually harm companies in the long term, because while we try to be protectionist if we're having a trade barrier or tariff barrier, what we do is we allow mediocrity to continue, and opening yourself up to that wider competition in the United States or elsewhere in the world actually does, I think, as you say, force us to become more competitive, more productive, more efficient, better at our jobs. How does EDC define who an exporter is?
Oh, it's a pretty wide mandate that we have. I mean, I think it's pretty easy to describe an exporter when okay, I make a thing, it comes off the line, put it in a box, put that box on a truck or a plane or a boat or whatever the mode of transportation is your preference. But service and technology is also so important to moving the marker on trade. I think so many companies, service companies out there, don't even realize that they are exporters. And I love to tell this story because I think it's just so funny, but I met this really lovely woman at an event, and we were talking about her company, and I introduced myself and where I was from, and she said, like, I feel bad, I don't want to waste your time tonight speaking with you. I'm definitely not an exporter. You should probably go mix and mingle with some other people. And I said, well, why don't you just tell me about your company, tell me what you do, and we'll figure it out. And so she went on to tell me that she organizes wine tours. And I'm like, oh, okay. Where do you do that? Well, I do it in Niagara Falls. And I said, oh, okay. Fabulous. So who do you do these wine tours for? Oh, well, lots of companies like to bring their employees from overseas to, have team building events and do their conferences. And I said, okay, well, who are you billing then? Well, she's billing all these international companies, not realizing that that's someone we would actually consider as an exporter. If you are invoicing a company that is outside of Canada, that's technically considered an export. It doesn't need to be something that goes in a box. You've exported your knowledge or your expertise, and that's really a big part of, attracting people to come into Canada, building the economy. There's benefits all around. But I also think about some companies who are a part of the supply chain, and auto is probably one of the best examples that we have. So we know that all the cars that are made in Canada, we cannot drive all of those. We cannot consume all of these cars. They're going all over the world. And EDC recognizes that, companies who are supplying into the OEMs, tier ones, tool and die makers, they are a big part of that supply chain and are also considered what we call indirect exporters. We, in the past, I would say 5 to 7 years, have even expanded further to say, if you have a contract or a PO that you've got in hand, or that you'll have in hand for the next 12 months, then we would consider you a future exporter, an exporter, if you will. And that's also a place where we can provide some support and use some of our programs and services to help you actually get there on that first export contract.
You mentioned that you want to increase, or EDC wants to increase trade by 60%. How the heck are you going to do that? What's the strategy that you're going to pursue?
Well, I think it really has to start with inspiring companies to want to grow. It requires a lot of planning and a lot of knowledge gathering and a lot of understanding of where you're going to go. A lot of companies currently already export to the US, but Canada has free trade agreements, I think 15 now, with 51 different countries, and kind of the sky's the limit. And it's really sitting down with companies to understand, like, what could be your best next step? What is stopping you from going there? And when we start to dig into kind of some of those dreams and aspirations, then we can really boil it down to, okay, what do you need? Who do you need to know? And I would say that dependency of personal network can be something that holds back companies all the time. That is one big piece of EDC's value proposition, is making sure that we are able to make the right connections in the market to the people you need at the moment. So, not only just people locally. I look at some of the municipal governments that we work with to do site selection, maybe for an expansion, to be able to warehouse more goods if you're going to be, sending more, goods, or, hiring more people to do services overseas, but also looking at kind of every level. So the Ontario government, and then once we get into kind of federal connections, then working with the Trade Commissioner Service. They run trade missions, they, make all sorts of introductions, and making sure that companies have someone there that they're connected to actually get these contracts, to get these introductions and get their foot in the door. Another great program that is run by the Trade Commissioner Service is the Can Export Grant. It's one that I think many don't know about, but it's a great program where you can get funding for breaking into a new market. So going to trade shows and, making those connections there as well, is so very, very important. So one that I always encourage everyone to check out. It's getting more and more popular. So I'm going to say, get on it as early as possible. But yeah, there's lots of different ways.
Okay, so I'm having trouble here. I really appreciate what you're trying to do, but I don't understand how you actually do it. So let's say I'm a small or medium size, Ontario-based company exporting something or other. Let's forget what the industry is, but something or other, or I'm developing and selling in Ontario, but I want to export it to the United States. And I come to you. It sounds to me like, number one, you're just going to introduce me to people. Like, tell me exactly what would I do? Would we sit down and have a exploratory meeting and you tell me what to do, or you help me do it, or what?
So, we really need to understand the business first to understand what it is that you want to do. There's so many unique, different reasons why people will choose certain markets to fall into.
Okay, so do I have to hire you to come to a meeting, or do you voluntarily come to a meeting?
Oh, voluntarily. I was going to say, everyone is welcome to call EDC. We are happy to come out and see you. There's no fee.
So let's pretend I just called you, and then what would we do? We'd have a half an hour long meeting or a full day long meeting?
We could have a half an hour. We can have an hour. It totally depends on the schedule. I know some business operators are extremely busy. I have had meetings where I have been there for 2 or 3 hours, depending on, who's at the table. Sometimes I go along with other financial institutions like banks, or perhaps with some of our sister crowns like a BDC or FCC, doing the plant tour, understanding what the business objectives are. Maybe I'll use an example. I went to go see one of my clients recently. We had not met since the end of the pandemic, or since the pandemic had started, I should say, rather. And they met one of their objectives to get to $40 million in revenue throughout the pandemic. And super happy for them, but they want to take it to the next level and get to $100 million. This is where they want to get with their company's revenue over the next, I'll say 5 years. And so we talked a little bit about, okay, well, could you do that through organic growth? And possibly, yes, maybe EDC could make some connections. Maybe they can increase their orders with their customers. But really, where they think they may have to step into is probably making some sort of acquisition of a company down in the US. And that's something that EDC can really, really help with. Whenever we get into financing transactions that are outside of Canada, it becomes inherently more risky. It's more difficult to do any recovery if, the transaction or the deal goes south, and it can make banks a little bit nervous. Maybe I'll say this, that we are really fortunate that in the Canadian banking economy, we can be conservative, and I think it has served us well. When I look back at the 2008 credit crisis, we rebounded much more quickly than many other countries, but it also can hold back exporters in a sense. And that's where EDC can come in to share some risk with a financial institution to ensure plans like that, making an acquisition or maybe even, opening up their own facility with their own employees in a different country can really come to fruition, but we can be there to help support and mitigate that risk for a financial institution.
Okay. Doing what? So, this company wants to buy this other smaller competitor down in some state in the United States. What would you do? Are you going to guarantee my loan? Or are you going to
precisely
give me a discount on my interest rate? What are you going to do?
Yeah, so guaranteeing on loan is really one of the places that we do our best work. So that's where we do some risk sharing with the bank, and it can look like many different things. I would say often start at, let's say, doing 50-50, but in some cases we can even guarantee up to 100%, particularly when we're looking at Canadian direct investment abroad. The other thing that I will say EDC does do, particularly when we're looking at, say an aggressive growth plan, is EDC can do direct lending ourselves. We want to make sure that the partnership is built with a Canadian financial institution because they're going to be, an important partner in the entire life cycle of the business. But if there is not capacity at the current lender, that's something that we can kind of step in to come and do as well.
So I'm in the real estate development business, and we've got a property management business, and I want to export that You said that someone that bills invoices people internationally is considered an exporter. So I invoice a bunch of different people in the United States for those properties and want to do more of it. So could you guarantee my loan for building an apartment building in the United States?
So what we would have to understand is really what the export plan is. And that's something that EDC can also help with. Typically, we would like to see, okay, what is going to be the purpose of funds and how are you going to use that to ultimately, bring benefit to Canada? So we would take a look at how that expansion would really look, how you're going to do more of that, and then really determine, what the need is there, how your financial institution would be able to come to the table, and then, whether an EDC guarantee is required or not. One of the things that I do like about our programs is we're not intending to try to stay in there forever. We're trying to really just help to accelerate that growth. And, once EDC is, not needed, maybe we can move on to a different project and be working on that there.
You also said financial risk. So other than guaranteeing a loan, what else would you do that mitigates financial risk?
So I will say that we did talk a little bit about the credit insurance previously, but again, that's one of the ones that, really comes to the forefront of, everything. It's really that big hurrah at the end of it. You've done all this work, you've made all these investments, and now am I going to get paid? And that is that big risk that we need to cover. The other risk that comes up from time to time is really when companies start to deal with trade instruments, when they're asked to issue, what might be called the standby letter of credit. These are instruments that are irrevocable and can be called at any time and are often put into place when companies need to do some sort of performance component. So, whether it's building something or there's a component where, there would need to be a penalty if this was not delivered on. That can tie up a ton of collateral when you need to have that issued through your bank. So that's another place that EDC can come in and actually provide 100% backstop unsecured to make sure that the collateral is available, the funding is available in order to actually complete that contract.
Really? That's a big benefit.
It is. And I will say, as I mentioned, there is that risk of, these instruments just being, I shouldn't say randomly called, but they can be called at any time. And certainly, that can be a bit risky. So we do have another form of insurance that can help to mitigate some risk for clients who are working with trade instruments like that. And really what it can protect on is wrongful calls. If somebody was having liquidity issues and decided just to pull on that just to get some cash, well, that would not be what was really stated within the original document, and that's somewhere where you could come to EDC for a claim on.
Now, do you charge for that, or do you provide it free of charge?
No, that is one of our paid services. Really, the way that we would determine price on that is taking a look at, what's the industry that you're functioning in, what your capabilities on completing the contract are. So really doing our due diligence to understand, what the company has done in the past, but taking a look at some other risks, by country. There are some countries out there that have, say, higher corruption risk than others. So, that's the type of thing that will be built into the price, and certainly for how long it's required for. A policy that is only needed for 3 months is, going to be cheaper than something that, is required for, say, 2 years.
Sounds like almost any company that's thinking about exporting should be at least contacting EDC to find out what services are available, what freebies are there, what paid services are a potential benefit.
Absolutely. And, I really think that's it. I think that there can sometimes be a bit of shyness, or, like I described that woman that I had spoken to at that event that
doesn't apply to me.
What's that? Sorry?
The attitude that it doesn't apply to me.
Precisely. And that's it. It really does apply to all companies because, there's a lot of good that we can do for the world. And I would suggest that if you are a company that is, looking to export, definitely reach out to us. If I would say, even if you're thinking that you don't want to do it, I love to have I like a healthy debate. So I'd love to have a conversation about, what's holding you back in order to move into that area.
So if I'm interested in chatting with EDC, what do? Do I contact Amanda Klucowicz, or do I, call my local EDC office, or what do I do?
Yeah, I mean, you can reach out to us in a number of different ways. So certainly, you can check out our website. I will say our call line on there is not a gigantic, call center where you are going to be just a number. The folks that work there's about 10 or 15 of them at any given time. And I was going to say, I personally trained a good majority of them when they started. So they are a group that interacts with, the relationship managers and the rest of the organization, and know quite a bit actually about our products and services, and can direct you to the right person within EDC based on, what conversation you might need to have. They might be able to serve you over the phone, but I will say most often what they want to do is actually connect you to a relationship manager who can come out and have that hands-on approach and understand and follow your story. Whether it's, just getting to know us now and then, kind of following you throughout the years, we are happy to have conversations for as long as it takes to make sure that you really got what you need.
Now, I understand you're located in Kitchener. I'm in Toronto. If I want to talk to someone at EDC, what do I do?
So I was going to say, everyone's welcome to connect to me, and I would make sure that you get connected to somebody who's local. So while I live in Kitchener, I actually cover the Vaughan, Woodbridge, Concord area for EDC. But what is so nice about working at EDC is all of the relationship managers across Ontario. I know them personally. I have, hung out with them, shared a meal. So I would make sure that you have somebody who's very close by, who would be able to know your local area and understand any specific challenges. Or if there's a specific industry that you're in, we may assign someone based on that to really have a better understanding of that industry overall.
One of the things I love doing, Amanda, is checking out what recommendations people have for people on LinkedIn. And I just got to read one about you. Amanda has been a role model for me in my career, even since I had the pleasure of shadowing her and tagging along to her customers and prospect meetings. With her warm and friendly personality, she would walk into a room and begin with getting to know the individuals and their plans and vision for the business. What was keeping them up at night? What were their goals? What questions did they need answers to? Then she would take back all of that insight she had gathered and worked with our internal teams to tailor a solution to the company's exact needs. Thanks to her deep product knowledge, she is capable of coming up with very creative solutions to some of her customers' most difficult challenges. Just last week, when her client informed her that the insurance provider couldn't insure one of her business strategy customers, she was able to provide them with an offer for single buyer insurance in under a day. Now that's customer service. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and all true. I was gonna say, I will toot my own horn in this moment, but that really is what we want to do. We want to make sure that if there's any gaps in the market, the situation that you just described was actually a customer who has an insurance policy with a private insurer, and they're getting a great rate, and they're mostly getting the coverage that they need. So there's no need for me to disrupt that. They have what they need in order to do better. But there was one contract that their insurer could not get there on. I was like, this is the value that we can actually bring to the table. A brand new client to them. They wanted to offer terms so that they could be competitive. And here it is. We were able to ensure that single buyer, they went on, they were able to get their quote, I think in less than 10 minutes, went in, filled out the information, had an offer back, and were able to accept it. Like, truly, the investment in digitization that we have made has made it that easy for situations like that.
We're chatting tonight with Amanda Klucowicz about EDC, Export Development Canada. We're going to take a break for some messages and be back more with Amanda in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm having an interesting conversation with Amanda Klucowicz. She is a senior relationship management mid-market Vaughan at Export Development Canada. I've never really understood what EDC, Export Development Canada, does, and so I thought it'd be really interesting to check in with her and understand. I had a friend who I think highly of, who thought that Amanda was excellent and really was helping them in their business growth, and so I wanted to chat with her. I got to ask though.
Yes.
I understand that you completed the chef training program at George Brown. What the heck are you doing export development and taking a chef training program?
You know what? I don't know if anyone in kindergarten puts on their little drawing, oh yeah, when I grow up, I want to be a certified international trade professional. So, I did not expect to be in this industry. I came to EDC, I will say, in kind of a funny way. I was the first year that came out of that double cohort when they changed the provincial secondary school program. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I figured I should at least try to do something. So I registered for this chef training program and I loved it. I am still, I would say, an excellent cook. But something that I took a lot of skills away from. I mean, I finished the program and I worked in an assisted living facility for a couple of years and made the meals for 120 residents there. And people generally don't think that would connect back to international trade, but I will say some of the transferable skills, like being able to read. I know this does not sound like something that would go along with cooking, but we have all had a meal that's slightly over seasoned, and it's that half a teaspoon or quarter of a teaspoon of salt that just really sent it over the edge. Having details like that, being able to read financial statements with the same level of detail, those are the things that make a difference between a good experience and a delightful experience. And that's what I hope to give all the companies that I speak with, is that really delightful, detail-oriented type of experience that they need in order to do what they need to do on the global stage.
Well, I've never, ever, ever heard someone describe having too much or too little salt by a teaspoon or something like that as an example of how one can better analyze financial statements. So thank you for that incredible analogy. I'm going to have to use that at some point in time. What's your favorite dish to make?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to think. I am really into Mexican cuisine this month. I feel like whenever I start meal planning, because I do a lot of meal planning, if you can imagine that, but I kind of have themes for different months. So I feel like May gets kicked off with Cinco de Mayo. So, this week we've got a lovely corn salad that mimics the Mexican street corn. I'm going to do a seasoned skirt steak. So, that's what's on deck for right now. But I don't know if I could ever pick a favorite food. I don't know if there's a food I don't like, to be honest with
you. have theme months?
Yes. Absolutely. January, it's all about your diet food and smoothies and, feeling refreshed and healthy. And when we get into February, I feel like it's just, that's when you make all your romantic, fresh French dishes plus all your football food. Like that is the theme for the month for me. So
Football food. What's football field? Just
oh,
hot dogs?
like a good corn dog or trying to think. Oh, like a buffalo chicken dip, something like that. Like just those really kind of pub food, good for the soul, maybe not good for the waistline.
So I love a big, huge platter of nachos with everything on it for Super Bowl.
Yes. Yes, agree. So I will do like a nacho night once a week in February, usually a Friday. I feel like nachos are perfect for a Friday. You're tired from the week. You don't want to do too much. You just want to hang out on the couch. Nachos are perfect for it.
So Valentine's Day.
Yes.
I love Chateaubriand, but it
Oh,
takes a long time to make Chateaubriand.
yeah, but I mean, why not? That is the time to do it. If you are going to make a dish to really impress somebody, like why not let it be your significant other?
So what would be your favorite Valentine's Day dinner to make?
Well, my husband just loves when I cook steak. He says I make the best steak, so this is it. I get the cast iron, just ripping hot. Got to have butter and oil, and you really got to make sure you're timing it perfectly. You don't want it to get that gray band. You really want to make sure that it kind of gets that perfect crust on the outside. We've recently got a sous vide, so I feel like I'm going to have to test that out to see whether I like the sous vide plus cast iron skillet searing situation.
And so how do you cook it? Medium rare or medium or what?
Yeah, I'm more a medium rare kind of girl myself. We have a couple of relatives who like it a little bit more done. So pains me slightly, but hey, everyone likes what they like and everyone should have what they like when they eat.
What a fascinating background you've got. Trained as a chef and now running an office for Export Development Canada. Let me take a step back if I could.
Yeah.
I think that we've heard a lot about supply chain issues in the course of the last couple of years because of the pandemic. We've had a lot of concerns listed about China and that they're mercantilist in their attitude toward trade. President Biden in the States has been almost protectionist in his attitudes with, if it's not made or somewhat made in the United States, we're not going to buy it. Is this attitude that we've had over the course of the last really generation of increasing trade worldwide, is it coming to a stall or is it going to reverse or what?
Well, I was going to say, if I give my personal opinions here, I would say that trade relationships are changing. One of the things that we noticed quite a bit, or maybe a trend that we saw over the pandemic, was because of these supply chain issues, and not because of stereotypes or anything like that, but more so that there were so many challenges moving stuff around the globe over the past couple of years that many companies decided to do to change supplier relationships rather than dealing with China, where we traditionally saw so much of the outsourcing of manufacturing happen, that some of that transferred back either to North America or into South America, just because they were able to move goods more quickly. And so that really kind of mixed things up in terms of what was going on. There was a lot of, I'll say, heartburn for folks that, trying to negotiate any kind of payment terms throughout the pandemic was just so terribly difficult. But I will say, I believe that things are starting to soften slightly. Supply chain issues are starting to really normalize. Shipping costs have gone down. So there is some recovery that is happening there. And it will be interesting to see if companies go back to some of the relationships that they used to have, pre-pandemic or at the beginning of the pandemic.
So you think that international trade is going to continue, but it's going to be a little bit more challenging in the current marketplace, and what people need more help from entities like yours?
Yes, absolutely. And I would say, when you kind of mentioned about kind of sentiments around certain countries, I would say EDC really wants to make sure that anywhere that you're doing business is good ethical business. So like, let us not, layer, too many stereotypes on anything, but we like to do due diligence and understand, all of the aspects of a transaction or a deal very deeply to understand who the supplier is, where's the manufacturing happening, so that we can make sure that we really set an example as to how business should be done around the world. And I definitely see that companies more and more are bringing this conversation of environmental and social governance into, their world as a real, way that they want to function. So I think that there is certainly a level of sophistication that is being built within Canada in terms of how companies operate. And, I think that is going to really kind of push us forward. It brings us new, interesting challenges and puts us really on the forefront of being able to meet that goal of 60% increase in trade.
Give us an example, a case study, if you could, of someone that you've helped.
Oh gosh, I have quite a few. But because we were talking about China, maybe I'll talk a little bit about somebody who comes to mind who did a lot of outsourcing of their manufacturing there. So I worked with a company, or still work with a company. They've been with EDC for about 10 years, and I've worked with them for about 5. But they have done an amazing job of building out a whole product suite of different types of outdoor equipment for kids and adults, I should say, as well, because we all like to have a little fun outside during the pandemic. Everyone was baking bread, getting out, doing good old fashioned stuff. But they really had such huge orders that were coming in during the pandemic because of all of these cancellations on programs. People couldn't take their kids to swimming anymore, or soccer, or anything like that. So parents were really looking to fill these gaps in their time and make sure that their kids were still active. And this company, the sales were going through the roof. I mean, they were dealing with Walmart, which is, as we know, such a huge company and such a behemoth to deal with. And not only were they getting these regular orders, but also orders for Black Friday. And that is where we started to take a look and say, okay, what's the cycle of the business? Like, yes, there's some seasonality. Of course, you want a scooter in Canada in July, but being able to sell into the United States, Southern United States especially, well, they have a much longer season when they can use those kind of outdoor toys. So great way to diversify, help to kind of stabilize some of that revenue was coming in, but still this big Black Friday piece existed. So what we did is actually set up a facility with their bank where we guaranteed 75% of the loan, and we set it up that they could actually get lending on their POs rather than their accounts receivable. So kind of like a bit of a PO finance, quasi PO financing kind of setup, but making sure that they could cover the costs that they needed to give to their suppliers to start this manufacturing early enough in the process, they could actually deliver to Walmart. If anyone has ever done work with Walmart, you know that they have some very specific contracts. They want things to be delivered at a certain day, at a certain time. You cannot have empty shelves. It's really important. It's a part of their brand that they are going to have what you need when you need it. And this was a great way for us to come in and support this company by doing something a little bit different than just the normal traditional operating line that you would get with a bank. So it was a really great story. They were able to deliver on all of their contracts. And in the time that I've worked with them, they had grown their company from $8 million to $50 million in sales.
That's a nice increase.
Yeah, pretty great. It's pretty impressive.
Outdoor play equipment.
Yep. And, they were able to then, with the money that they generate, again, redevelop some of their brands, but then also look at where else they could work with some of their other customers to really say, okay, well, what else do you need? How about, I don't know, stuff for yoga? If your mom's there picking up a scooter for the kids, maybe she's going to want to do some outdoor activity. Yoga outside might be the thing that she's looking at. So really being able to broaden their product suite to reach more of their customers as well.
Fascinating. Have you got another example you can give us?
Yeah, I would say one that actually came up again, I think so many companies had such a tough time over the past few years, and, it makes it really difficult for, financial institutions like EDC or like a bank to really get a good handle on, what is normal for the company. We're looking at all these financial statements now. It's like, okay, well, this year was great, but this year wasn't, and it's up, it's down, it's all over the place. But I had a customer who I had worked with in the past who had this contract, and they really wanted to make sure that they were able to deliver on this. They've worked with, their customer in the past, but they needed upfront costs again, or upfront funding to make sure that they could actually purchase all these supplies and pay the folks in their group to actually put together this big piece of equipment that they were shipping to the United States. And that's again where we came in. We were able to do kind of a pre-shipment facility for this company to really make sure that they had the capital that they needed to perform on this contract.
We're going to take a break for some messages and come back with some concluding comments with Amanda Klucowicz with Export Development Canada. I'm going to offer a couple of my suggestions as to what I've found as the keys to success in growth internationally, and we'll see what Amanda has to say about them and what suggestions she's got. Because all of us, I think, in business want to be ambitious and grow our sales, and clearly Canada's got to look south of the border and elsewhere around the world if we want to do that. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Amanda Klucowicz, who is a Senior Relationship Manager at EDC, Export Development Canada. She's a certified international trade professional for the last 15 years after her chef's training and working as a chef in an assisted living facility, cooking a lot of steaks and other things. She has been working at EDC, and she supported many Canadian companies on their journey to find success in a variety of global markets. EDC has a very ambitious plan to increase trade in the next 7 years by 60%, which in the environment of protectionism and trade barriers and mercantilism, supply chain problems, sounds like a pretty ambitious plan. And so I think that it's great for us to chat with Amanda tonight. Amanda, what are some struggles what are the biggest problems that you've seen, the biggest challenges that companies have had, and how do you deal with them?
Yeah, so I'll say one at the moment that is starting to kind of bubble up is I think we're starting to see some of the effects of perhaps some of the government programs that are starting to fall off. I mean, this is just my own personal observations, but, we have seen that, claims are starting to go up, in our insurance group. So that's an indicator that, liquidity might start to be, it's starting to become a challenge overall. We take a look at what companies are able to get in terms of their credit approvals. And sometimes that can be a little bit more challenging. So, maybe this is best demonstrated through an example, but I had one of my clients who was looking to work with a company down in Mexico. And they came to us for credit approval. And, we have kind of noticed that this company that they would like to work with is starting to have some history of being slow to pay. So we can see some of those effects of maybe some of these programs might be running out. And, this kind of puts a little bit of a crunch now on exporters, not being able to give terms because it might not necessarily be safe. It's going to be pretty risky. So, I mean, certainly EDC wants to be here and wants to take more risk, but we want to be intentional about what that risk really looks like. So if we really have information to say that, I don't think that this is not going to pan out well, that's where we have a responsibility to also try to, problem solve with our customers and understand what we can do to really, we don't want to be a business prevention department by any means, but, we really need to think a little bit more broadly rather than just giving the information. So in this case, I was actually able to connect with one of our international offices, explained, what my customer does, what's the nature of their product and service. And, we were able to find another company that might be better placed to work with them, not only from a financial perspective, but we know that we've already done our due diligence on them, and they have a very strong mandate in terms of the way that they run their company, in terms of the ESG or environmental social governance stance that they take on all of their policies. So really trying to find not just business to do, but really good business to do.
That's, I think, an excellent suggestion. Let me ask you about a couple experiences that I've had and see what you think that makes sense. Because I've worked for some companies that have tried to do international trade. I think one of the keys is that a lot of people don't know much about Canada. I've been shocked at how little people in the United States, people in Europe actually know about Canada. We live here and we work here, and so therefore we think that everyone should know a lot, and they don't. They ask me if I know their friend in Calgary when I live in Toronto, and so they've got a poor perception of how big Canada is. And so I've found that getting down into the United States or going to Europe and actually meeting people is key. You can't expect to do it over the telephone. You can't expect to do it over Zoom. You actually actually have to establish that personal relationship, which I think is the same in Canada, but it's even more so important when you're talking about international. So you got to be able to you got to be willing to invest in that travel. I found conferences very helpful and successful. I went to Harvard Business School, and so when I go on a business trip, I always check to see if there's a local event. I've been a member of Rotary, and I often will check to see if there's a Rotary event. So I'll try to go to a local event that I've got a justification to attend to make contacts in addition to being there on business. And then I try to get a speaking gig, because if I can actually speak at a conference and hopefully impress the people in attendance, I've got a real success. And then I also try to find a local person that can be my wingman or wingwoman and help me out. Not necessarily people talk about you have to have a local partner. I don't think you need to have necessarily a local partner. You don't have to give away half your business, but having someone that's there on the ground that knows the local people, the local lingo, the local connections, etc., is helpful. What do you think of those suggestions?
Yeah, I think those are so great. And, one that I would say is so in line with what I've heard over the past couple of years. I think it was one of the biggest pain points for the business owners was really that they were like, I want to get back on a plane and get out there and meet people in person. And you could feel it that they were really, missing this part of the business, because it is how relationships are formed. It's, of course, we have great interactions over Zoom or Teams or whatever, but, sitting down and sharing a meal or a beer or whatever it is always such a great way to build relationships. And, you talked about trade shows, and that's a place that EDC also spends lots of its time. We attended Seattle recently, given our focus on the food and beverage industry. And we wanted to make sure that we were very targeted in, getting to know more companies there and, who they were wanting to get to know. So really understanding, who exporters want to be a part of their ecosystem is so helpful for us, because we can use our connections, whether it's here in Canada or in our 20 international offices, to make sure that we can help to facilitate that as well. But you made such a good point about just knowing the lay of the land. And that is something that I love to connect with our international offices on as well. They can just give knowledge about what the current, real economic conditions are. There's lots of data and statistics, and that's really difficult to sift through, even for somebody who's in the industry. So having somebody who can kind of translate that, if you will, is an important asset. So something I like to do for my clients is make sure that they know everyone at EDC all around the world.
The other thing that I've found is that if you want to be competitive internationally, you have to take the exchange rate risk. You can't expect the buyer to take the exchange rate risk. And so therefore you've got to price in US dollars or in euros and hedge that yourself. What do you think? Is that true?
So, one of the best recommendations, because I am no FX guru myself, this place I wish I knew a little bit more about. I always recommend that companies either speak to their bank or another financial institution that specializes in that. The ways that the rates fluctuate, even on a daily basis, is something that becomes really difficult to try to manage and monitor. And that's not your full-time job. The full-time job is really operating the business, growing it, trying to get out there. So, if you can, outsource that or offload that to somebody, that's really going to be key intel for you. A way that EDC can come to the table and, support on that as well is, sometimes if you put together a hedging strategy and the financial institution is concerned that there might be a margin call, they may ask you to post collateral. And that's something that EDC can guarantee, so that you don't kind of start hanging up funds in trying to, build out something that's a little bit more streamlined.
Amanda Klucowicz, thank you so much for joining us and telling us a little bit about EDC's growth strategy and about how you personally, as well as other relationship managers at EDC, help Canadian companies grow abroad. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, Brian. It's been great.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from Kitchener or Vaughan, at www.saga960am.ca. Good night, everybody.